All right, Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to the, wow, we are at actually the sixth part of X Speak. Today is February the 15th, 2015, and we are joined by some collaborators in Durham, North Carolina, who I will introduce in a moment. The project is called X Speaks, Ms. Benedict, and X Collaborators. This is a collaborative social practice project. It happens over the internet. It happens in people's homes. It happens in mosques. It happens in universities and colleges. It is X Speak. So in February, throughout this month, February 2015, I've been leading this project in which X Speak, which I invite several members of the African American Muslim community to read or present Malcolm X's final speeches, and then to have discussions that reflect on his is actually the 50th anniversary of when Malcolm X delivered these speeches. So all of his speeches are being presented on the exact dates that Malcolm X delivered them 50 years earlier. So in many ways, this project is a commemoration, it's a celebration, it's a point of reflection, and it is a way to bring different members of our community together. So the X in X Speaks represents Malcolm X and the Project X Speaks project collaborators who are African American Muslims, who through reading Malcolm X's final words, his speeches which he gave during the last 3 weeks of his life, will activate his speech and also embody and take on and reflect two of the very important identities of Malcolm X, as being a Black person and being a Muslim. Malcolm X was an African American Muslim minister and human rights activist. In 1964, a year before his assassination, he went on a religious pilgrimage to Mecca and was forever changed on February 15th, stating, "While I was in Mecca among the Muslims, I had a chance to meditate and think and see things with a great deal of clarity," which was much greater, with a clarity that was much more clarity than he had achieved over in the United States. He had renounced his anti-white views, which he had become very popular for as a minister in the Nation of Islam. And he stated on February 14th, 1965, in a speech given in Detroit, a speech that he gave actually yesterday, myself and my sisters gave actually yesterday, that the real religion of Islam doesn't teach anyone to judge another human being by the color of his skin. He promoted unity amongst all people and increased international outlook to solve the human rights violations against Black people during that time. Because his death occurred on the brink of his changed philosophy and spiritual orientation, his later philosophy is less known. Malcolm X is seen as one of the greatest African Americans who have ever lived, and his words, his example holds a very special place in the hearts and minds of African American Muslims, and he stands as a model of leadership, social change, and community engagement. So throughout this project, people are invited to participate by watching on Google Plus, on YouTube, and actually directly from my website, thisfingernite.com/xspeak. So tonight's speech was delivered at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, and it'll be delivered from our collaborators in Durham, North Carolina, who I'll introduce in a moment. The speech is called "There's a Worldwide Revolution Going On." This speech was given to a rally of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which was held at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, New York, and it was attended by 700 people. The meeting had originally been scheduled to publicly present the OAAU's platform. And in a statement to the press released several days earlier, Malcolm X announced that the program was designed to galvanize the Black masses of Harlem to become the instrument of their own liberation, and would put forth solutions for arresting the economic, social, and political gangrene that is daily administered to the Black community by rent gouging landlords, thieving merchants, and downtown politicians. Only such a program, he said, can serve as an alternative to violence and bloodshed threatened by the frustrations building up in the Black community. Malcolm returned from Detroit the morning of Monday, February 15th, to accusations of the Nation of Islam in New York that he had bombed his own house. Those of you who were with us yesterday, or if you can also watch the speech from yesterday, know that Malcolm X began that speech talking about the fact that his home was bombed, and he and his children and his wife had escaped. The charges were echoed by some city officials and reported in the media. So he was being charged with having bombed his own home. So given the seriousness of the attempt on the lives of Malcolm and his family and the need to respond to some smear campaign being organized, the OAAU leaders decided to postpone the presentation of the organization's program until February 21st, which unfortunately, as we know, was the day that Malcolm X was assassinated. The text of Malcolm X of this speech, was transcribed. And so I will now introduce to you all our ex-collaborators. We are so excited. We have a large collaborative group with us today. We have two families, which I'm so fortunate to have met and gotten to know a bit in Durham, North Carolina, where I currently reside. And so we have two Muhammad, or the Muhammad Brandon family and the Muhammad family with us. We have Sister Baina Muhammad, who, for those of you who are watching on screen, she's to our left, and Sister Baina Muhammad, Dr. Baina Muhammad, is an associate professor of history at North Carolina Central University. She received her BAS in Africa Diaspora Studies from Bennett College for Women. During her tenure at Bennett, she studied abroad at the University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. She earned an MA in History from North Carolina Central University and her PhD in History from Morgan State University. Dr. Muhammad's research interests and publications include African culture and identity within the African diaspora and the Black press. Her current research is an examination of Black Muslim women's activism among members of the Warzi Muhammad community. Her husband, who is to our right on screen, is a North Carolina native. He has a bachelor's degree and master's degree in psychology from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University and North Carolina Central University, respectively. Dwayne has also earned a PhD in biobehavioral health from Penn State University. And Dr. Brandon is an associate professor in the Department of Psychology at North Carolina University. His research examines the relationship between psychosocial factors, health outcomes, and health behaviors among African American adults. We will also, inshallah, be joined by their four children, their four sons, Jabril, Israfil, Mikhail, and Idris. And in the middle, we have Sister Lisa Muhammad and her husband, Salahuddin Muhammad. Salahuddin has a master's degree in Islamic studies from Hartford Seminary. He is a Muslim spiritual guide for the Life Connections program for re-entry at the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Virginia and an associate imam at As-Salam Islamic Academy in Raleigh, North Carolina. He is joined by his wife, Lisa Muhammad. Lisa Muhammad currently serves as a parent organizer with Education Justice Alliance based in Wake County, North Carolina. They parent three children, Ramaya, Samaya, and Sadiq. And they will be delivering from North Carolina, from Durham, North Carolina. They will be delivering the speech. There's a worldwide revolution going on. wait a moment while they unmute. So this speech, as I mentioned, was delivered at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, which is currently the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Center. And this is the same site where Malcolm X was unfortunately assassinated. So it's an interesting sort of an unfortunate coincidence that this was the speech in which he planned to deliver his the platform for the OAU, and it was postponed until the 21st. So we weren't actually ever able to hear that. But we're ready with the Muhammad families, Muhammad Branch's family and the Muhammad family in Durham, North Carolina. They'll be delivering again this speech. There's a worldwide revolution going on.
Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters, many of you have probably known that tonight we were going to unfold a program which we felt would be beneficial to the struggle of our people in this country. But because of the events which were beyond our control, we feel that it is best that we postpone unfolding the program that we had in mind until a later date. Sunday morning, about 3 o'clock, somebody threw some bombs inside my house. Normally, I wouldn't get excited over a few bombs, but the ones who threw these not only aimed them in the rooms where there was no one, but even in the rooms where 3 of my daughters sleep. One daughter 6, one daughter 4, and one daughter 2. And since I am quite certain that those who threw the bombs knew my house well enough to know where everyone was sleeping, I can't quite bring my heart to a point where it can be in any way merciful, or from now on compromising toward anyone who can be that low. Especially when I hear on the news today that Joseph, a brother that I found in the garbage can in Detroit in 1952, that's where I found him, made the statement that I had bombed my own house. Now you see, this doesn't surprise me, because I know since many of us left the Muslim movement, its intelligence and its morals have gone bankrupt. Both its intelligence and its morals have gone bankrupt. And now they are using the same tactics that are used by the Ku Klux Klan. When the Klan bombs your church, they say you did it. When they bomb a synagogue, they say the Jews bombed their synagogue. This is a Klan tactic. And tonight, I'll tell you why the Black Muslim movement is now adopting the same tactics against Black people as has been up to now exclusively a method of the Ku Klux Klan. I want to point out too that I'm not talking about the Muslims just to make white people happy, because I don't believe in letting anyone use me against somebody else. I'm telling you these things because it has reached a point where I feel that Black people in this country need to know what's going on. And I'm talking about an organization which I had a hand in building, which I had a hand in organizing. I know its characteristics, I know its potential, I know its behavioral patterns, I know what it can do and what it cannot do. And one of the things that it can do is bomb your house and try to kill your babies. Before we get into it, I would like to point out also, as many of you know, last weekend, I was invited to address the first Congress of the Council of African Organizations in London. They had a 4-day Congress from the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And had invited me there to make the closing address and bring the delegates from the various African organizations that are situated on the European continent up to date in regards to the struggle of the Black man in this country and in his quest for human rights and human dignity. And in conjunction with that invitation, I had gotten an invitation to visit Paris from the Afro-American community in Paris, which was sponsoring a rally in conjunction with the African community. And I was supposed to go there Tuesday also and address them and let them know the state of development or the lack of development of our program in this country for human rights and toward human rights. As many of you know, when I got to Paris, the man said I couldn't come in. Some man, French man. They gave me no explanation other than to say, we have our orders. They wouldn't let me phone the American embassy, and they tried to imply that the American embassy was behind it. I told them I didn't know de Gaulle had become a satellite of Lyndon B. Johnson. I knew that Kennedy had made a satellite out of Khrushchev and Britain and half the other countries, but I didn't think that France was a satellite of the United States. Well, this made them angry because they like to be independent, to pretend to be independent. But they wouldn't let me in. They wouldn't let me phone the American embassy. Later on, when I got back to London, and by the way, when I got back to London, there were delegates from about 20 different African organizations on hand in the airport. They were going to raise hell if anything had happened other than what was supposed to happen. As it was, I re-entered England with no trouble and immediately got in phone contact with the brothers and sisters who were in Paris by telephone. And they pointed out that they had encountered some difficulty, first with the Communist Trade Union workers. Mind you, the Communist Trade Union workers had prevented them from renting their hall. And when they went to get another hall, the same communist group had exercised its influence to prevent them from getting that hall. Finally, when they did get a hall, evidently, someone was strong enough to exercise influence over the French government. And I might add that while I was in the custody of the French, every time I made a request, before they would say yes or no, they telephoned the French Foreign Ministry so that they were taking orders from someone high up in the French Foreign Ministry who did not want me to enter France. And there's a reason for it. I don't blame them. And I told them that while I was there, maybe my plane got mixed up and I was in South Africa, in the wrong country. I told them, this couldn't be Paris. It must be Johannesburg. And they got red. And you know how they can get red. One of them was pink. The same thing happened in England, as many of you probably read in the Sunday Times Tribune. Something happened? No, it's okay. Okay. There was a great fear in England concerning me speaking at the West Indian community. This is because England has a very serious color problem developing, because so many of our people are migrating there from British West Indies. France, quietly as it's kept, has a very serious color problem developing because of the migration to France of our people from the French West Indies. And with these people from the French West Indies, black people going to France, others from the British West Indies going to England, coupled with Asians who are coming from the Commonwealth territories, all with Africans from French Equatorial West Africa, formerly in France, and British possessions in Britain, is a large increasing number of dark-skinned people swelling the dark population of France and Britain. And it's giving them a great deal of cause to worry. The only difference over there and over here is that no one of black skin in France has ever tried to unite the dark-skinned people together. Neither have they done so in England. So you can somewhat see what their fear is. No effort has been made to unite Afro-American communities in the American Negro with the West Indian community, or then those two communities with the African community, and those communities with the Asian community. This has never been done in either England or France. But when I was in France in November, for just a few days, I was successful in getting a few Afro-Americans who lived there together and formed a branch of the OAAU, the Organization of Afro-American Unity. As soon as they formed this branch, they began to work in conjunction with the African organizations and became a power that had to be reckoned with. And this is what the French government did not want. Also, the same thing in Britain. The West Indian community is very restless, or rather, yes, restless and dissatisfied. And they too are trying to organize or find someone who can bring them together. And this has caused in England a great deal of fear, a great deal of concern. And the effect of it is that it makes them act in very silly ways sometimes.
Now, to leave that for a moment, If you'll recall, when I was in Mecca in September, I wrote back a letter which was printed in the New York Times, in which I pointed out that this was my intention when I returned to expose Elijah Muhammad as a religious faker. This is what I wrote. Now, while I was in Mecca among the Muslims, I had a chance to meditate and think and see things with a great deal of clarity, with much greater clarity than I've achieved from over here, entangled with all this mess that we are confronted by constantly. And I had made up my mind, yes, that I was going to tell the black people in the Western Hemisphere, whom I had played a great role in misleading into the hands of Elijah Muhammad, exactly what kind of man he was and what he was doing. And I might point out right here that it was not a case of my knowing it all the time, because I didn't. I had blind faith in him, the same as many of you have, and still have blind faith in Jesus, or blind faith in Moses, or blind faith in somebody else. My faith in Elijah Muhammad was more blind and more uncompromising than any faith that any man has ever had for another man. And so I didn't try and see him as he actually was, but being away, I could see him better, understand many things better. Well, when I came back to this country, if you'll recall, I was very quiet. When I was on the Les Crane show, Les tried to ask me some questions about him and I ducked it. I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to get into it. Well, the reason for that was this. The letter that I wrote was written when I was in Arabia in September, whereas after leaving Arabia, I had gone to Africa. I had an opportunity to hold long discussions with President Julius Nyerere in what's now Tanzania, with Jomo Kenyatta, the president of Kenya, the Republic of Kenya, long discussions with Prime Minister Milton Obote of Uganda, President Azikwe of Nigeria, President Nkrumah of Ghana, and President Sekou Toure of Guinea. And the understanding that I got from conversations with these men, and they are great men, the understanding that I got broadened my scope so that I felt I could see the problems confronting Black people in America and the Western Hemisphere with much greater clarity. And I felt foolish coming back to this country, getting into a little two-bit argument with some bird-brained person who called himself a Black Muslim. I felt that I'd be wasting my time. I felt that it would be a drag for me to come back here and allow myself to be in a whole lot of public arguments and physical fisticuffs, knowing what I knew, and knowing that it would actually be more beneficial to our people if a constructive program were put in front of them immediately. Many of you will recall shortly after I came back, despite the fact that I said something about the Black Muslims, a wire was put into the newspaper under the name of Raymond Sharif, threatening me if I were to say anything about Elijah Muhammad. Actually, that wasn't Raymond Sharif's wire. That was Elijah Muhammad's wire. Raymond Sharif has no words of his own. If you recall, when I was in the Black Muslim movement, I never said anything without saying Elijah Muhammad teaches us thus and so, or Elijah Muhammad says thus and so. This is the way the Black Muslim movement is organized. Nobody makes any public statements unless it comes from Elijah Muhammad. And nobody makes any moves unless it comes from Elijah Muhammad. They didn't do it then, and they don't do it now. So when Raymond Sharif put this letter in the paper, that wire in the paper, that wire was from Elijah Muhammad himself. And he was trying to irk me into saying something so that a public hullabaloo could take place again. But because they wanted to jockey me into the same position I was in before I left this country. Before I left this country, I had permitted them to jockey me into a position. Me and the good brothers and sisters who had sense enough to leave from down there. I was foolish enough to let them jockey me into a position where we were taking pot shots at each other, so to speak. And it was known throughout the country that Muslims in the temple were trying to do this thing. So it put me in a spot where anybody can do it and then blame it on the foolish Muslims. And I was well aware of this. So by staying away for 4 or 5 months, that ended. But when I came back, being quiet, they wanted the same thing again. They wanted some more hullabaloo so that it would appear that the black Muslims are going to do this and the black Muslims are going to do that. And then somebody could do it and blame those fools, and they wouldn't have sense enough to see it. You can understand that, can't you? And when I say anybody, I mean anybody. But I know who those anybody's are. I continue to ignore them, and concentrate on trying to get the Organization of African American Unity better organized, because I knew and I felt that this is what it had in mind, would actually solve the problem of many of our people, or most of our people. But despite the fact that I tried to keep quiet on January 22nd, I came out of my house one night and they jumped me on a Friday night about 11:15. Now I knew they weren't out there waiting for me, because normally I wouldn't come out at that time of night. So that when I did come out and ran into them, they jumped me. I knew then that they were casing my house. And frankly, I waited for them for a month. I sit around the house with my rifle, stayed up all times of the night just to get one chance to put somebody in hell. Just one chance. I warned my wife at the time that they were casing the house. Again, I know their behavior. And I also became more careful wherever I would go and whenever I would go anywhere. And then to make it worse, and when I went to Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, they had gotten so insane that they chased me right down the Hollywood freeway in broad daylight. Yes. And now the things that you have to consider about this is the police were at the airport. The police knew what they were up to. In fact, the police arrested a couple of them in front of someone's home the night before. They knew all about it. Nothing was said in the paper. Now imagine somebody is chasing you down the Hollywood freeway at 80 miles an hour and it doesn't get in the paper. No. So that was on a Thursday. Friday, I was in Chicago. I appeared on the Cupsonet. And when I went on Cup's show, I had about 20 police. There were 20 police out there guarding the station. When I came out, the Muslims were there. And they even tried to attack the police, which was never put in the paper. They followed the police because they got kind of nuts. And I'm thankful that I'm out of there. I don't know what to do, really, because I was the same kind of nuts. I was just as nuts as they were. If Elijah Muhammad had told me to get somebody's head, I would have gone and gotten it, just like that. And that's what's the matter with them. They're only following what I taught them how to do. So I understand. But despite the fact that they put on this performance, it was quieted down. Nothing was said about it. And then the night that I was on the Susskind show, David Susskind show, those same persons had surrounded them. They had surrounded the station, had even almost strong-armed the police. Police didn't do a thing to strike back at them. They almost had to strong-arm them. Nothing was done about that. But while I was on the Hotline show, in fact, they had come to the studio and told Susskind that I wasn't going to be down there that night. And they told him that I would never make it. But again, I know how they do. And I, thanks to Allah, did something other than what they expected.
So the next thing that irritated them the most was this. And I've been doing it for a month. And nobody knew why I was doing it. You notice I have shifted my attack from them to Rockwell and the Ku Klux Klan for the past month. I've been beating on the Klan and beating on Rockwell and beating on these so-called right-wingers. You may wonder why. I sent a wire to Rockwell warning him if anything happened to black people in Alabama, that we would give him a maximum retaliation. The press knew it. You heard nothing about it. Rockwell disappeared because he's scared of people like anybody else. But they know that he has strength only as long as he's dealing with somebody that's nonviolent. Rockwell and his whole crowd are brave only as long as they're dealing with someone nonviolent. The Ku Klux Klan and that crowd are brave only when they're dealing with someone nonviolent. Citizen Council and the crowd are brave only when they're dealing with someone that's nonviolent. And you know it. So he cleared out. I went to Alabama. Purposely to see what was happening down there. While I was there, I wasn't trying to interfere with King's program, whatever it was. He was in jail. So I spoke at Tuskegee. I spoke at Tuskegee Institute last Tuesday night. I think it was. There were over 3,000 students and others. And it was the students themselves that night who insisted that I go with them the next morning to the ceremony. Some students from SNCC. So I went. After giving careful thought, I went. When I got to Selma, the press began to bug me right away. And I wouldn't even tell them my name. I just ignored them completely. So they insisted that I hold a press conference. I didn't ask for a press conference. They insisted that I hold a press conference, which was held. The press was there. The Klan was there. When you look at the cops in Alabama, you're looking at the Klan. That's who the Klan is. Knowing where I was right then and there, I reminded Lyndon B. Johnson of the promise that he had made to good or well-meaning Americans. When he was running for president, he said that if he were elected, he would pull the sheet off the Ku Klux Klan. Did he not say that? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So here you got Klansmen marching little babies down the road with a forced march. You've got Klansmen knocking black women down in front of a camera. And that poor fool black man standing on the sidelines like he's nonviolent. No, we don't go along with a thing like that. Well, it was then in Selma, Alabama, in front of the face of the Ku Klux Klan, that I demanded in your name, the Organization of African American Unity. Could I make a demand in your name that since 97% of the black people in this country have supported Lyndon B. Johnson and his party, and now that his party has the largest majority that any president has had in a long time, Lyndon B. Johnson is obligated to the black man in this country to set up an immediate federal commission to investigate the Ku Klux Klan, which is a criminal organization organized to murder and maim and cripple black people in this country. And I pointed out that if Lyndon B. Johnson could not keep his promise and expose the Ku Klux Klan, then we would be within our rights to come to Alabama and organize the black people of Alabama, pull the sheet off the Klan ourselves. And we can do it, brothers and sisters. We can do it. And the federal government won't do it. Since then, there's been talk about a little investigation of the Klan and the Citizens Council and the black Muslims and some of the others. But they're not going to do anything. The only way the Klan is going to be stopped is if you and I organize and stop them ourselves. That's what stops them. You may say, well, why am I so down on the Klan all of a sudden? I'm going to tell you why. And why did I shift my attack from the black Muslim, Elijah Muhammad, and his immoral self to the Klan? Yes, he's immoral. You can't take 9 teenage women and seduce them and give them babies and then tell me you're moral. You can't do it if you admit you did it and admit that the babies were yours. I'll shake your hand and call you a man. A good one too. But anytime you seduce teenage girls and make them be charged with adultery, make them hide your crime, why? You're not even a man, much less a divine man. And this is what he did. He took at least 9 that we know about. And I'm not speculating because he told these to me himself. Yes, that's what he wants me. That's why he wants me dead, because he knew as soon as I walked out that I'll tell it. 9 of them. Not 2 of them that are suing him, but 9 of them. And the FBI knows it. The law in Chicago knows it. The press even knows it. And they won't expose the man. And don't let me get out here tonight without telling you why they won't expose him. Why they're afraid to expose him. They know that if they expose him, that he has the most.
See, the Black Muslim movement, it was organized in such a way that it attracted the most militant, the most uncompromising, the most fearless, and the youngest of the black people in the United States. That's who went into it. Those who didn't mind dying. They didn't mind making a sacrifice. All they were interested in was freedom, justice, and equality. And they would do anything to see that it was brought about. These are the people who have followed him for the past 12 years. And the government knows it. But all of these ultra militants have been held in check in an organization that doesn't take an active part in anything. And therefore, it cannot be a threat to anybody because it's not going to do anything against anybody but itself.
Don't you know the way they threw that bomb in there? They could have thrown it in the Ku Klux Klan house. Why do they want to bomb my house? Why don't they bomb the Klan? I'm going to tell you why. In 1960, in December of 1960, I was in the home of Jeremiah, the minister in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I sat at the table myself with the heads of the Ku Klux Klan. I sat there myself with the head of the Ku Klux Klan, who at the time was trying to get with Elijah Muhammad so that they could make available to him a large area of land in Georgia, or I think it was South Carolina. They had some very responsible persons in that government who were involved in it and who were willing to go along with it. They wanted to make this land available to him so that his program of separation would sound more feasible to Negroes, and therefore lessen the pressure that integrationists were putting upon the white man. I sat there and negotiated. I listened to their offers, and I was the one who went back to Chicago and told Elijah Muhammad what they had offered now. This was in December of 1960.
The code name that Jeremiah gave the Klan leader was 666. Whenever they would refer to him, they would refer to him as Old Six. What's his name? Was right now escapes me. But they even sat there and told stories how what they had done on different escapades that they had been involved in. Jeremiah was there. His wife was there. I was there. The Klan was there. From that day onward, the Klan never interfered with the Black Muslim movement in the South. Jeremiah attended Klan rallies, as you read in the front pages of the New York Tribune. They never bothered him, never touched him. They never touched a Muslim, and a Muslim never touched them. Elijah Muhammad would never let me go back down south since January of 1961. I never went south. As long as I remained in the Black Muslim movement, again, from January 1961, because most of the action the Muslims got involved in was action that I was involved in myself. Wherever it happened in the country, where there was an action, it was an action that I was involved in, because I believed in action. I never have gone along with no Ku Klux Klan. And another one that he had made a deal with was this man, Rockwell. Rockwell and Elijah Muhammad are regular correspondents with each other. You can hate me for telling you this, but I'm going to tell it to you. Rockwell attended the rally because Elijah Muhammad put the okay on it, and Sharif, the captain of the FOI, Fruit of Islam, and I had discussed it, wondering why Rockwell would come to our meeting because it didn't help us. But Elijah Muhammad said, let him in. So he had to be let in. No one questioned what Elijah Muhammad said. Now, if you doubt that this is true, you get all of the back issues of Muhammad Speaks newspaper, and you find articles in it about the Ku Klux Klan actually praising them. Jeremiah interviewed, I think it was J.B. Stoner for the Muslim newspaper, and the old devil even gave him a contribution that he reported about in the paper. Sure he did. When the brothers in Monroe, Louisiana were involved in trouble with the police, if you'll recall, Elijah Muhammad got old Venable. Venable is the Ku Klux Klan lawyer. He's a Ku Klux Klan chieftain, according to the Saturday Evening Post. That was up on the witness stand. Go back and read the papers. You'll see that Venable was one who represented the Black Muslim movement in Louisiana. And brothers and sisters, until 1961, until 1960, until just before Elijah Muhammad went to the East, there was not a better organization among Black people in the country than the Muslim movement. It was militant. It made the whole struggle of Black men in this country pick up momentum because of the unity, the militancy, the tendency to be uncompromising. All these images created by the Muslim movement lent weight to the struggle of the Black man in this country against oppression. But after 1960, after Elijah Muhammad, he went over there in December of 59 and came back in January of 60. When he came back, the whole trend or direction that had formerly been taken began to change. And in that change, there's a whole lot of other things that had come into the picture. But he began to be more mercenary, more interested in money, more interested in wealth, and yes, more interested in girls. And I guess many of you have heard it said that his financial support came from a rich man in Texas. I heard that while I was in the movement. I heard it more since I left the movement. A rich man in Texas you can look up. Any of you can look up his name, but the FBI knows that too. But they still don't touch him, and I never have seen a man. And this rich man who lives in Texas, by the way, lives in Dallas. His headquarters is in Dallas. His money is in Dallas, the same city where President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And never have I seen a man in my life more afraid, more frightened than Elijah Muhammad when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I've never in my life seen a man as frightened as he was. And when I made the statement that I did, why, he almost cracked up behind it because there were all kinds of implications to it that at that time were way above and beyond my understanding.
Now, you may wonder why it is important to many interests for the Black Muslim movement to remain that I told you that it has the most militant, most uncompromising, most dissatisfying Black people in America in it. Men have left it. Many still are in it. The fear has been that if any had happened to Elijah Muhammad and the Black Muslim movement were to crumble, that all of those militants who formerly were in it and held in check would immediately become involved in the civil rights struggle, and they would add the same kind of energy to the civil rights struggle gave that they gave to Black Muslim movement. And there's a great fear, you know yourself. White people don't like black people to get involved in anything to do with the civil rights unless those black people are non-violent, loving, patient, forgiving, and all of that they don't like what he do, and there has been a conspiracy across the country on the part of many fractions of the press to suppress news that would open the eyes of Muslims who are following Elijah Muhammad. They continue to make him look like he's a prophet, somewhere who is getting some messages direct from God and is untouchable and things of that sort. I'm telling you the truth, but they do know that if something were to happen and these brothers, their eyes were to come open, they would be right out here in every one of these civil rights organizations, making these Uncle Tom Negro leaders stand up and fight like men instead of running around here like non-violent, acting like women.
So they hope that Elijah Muhammad remains as he is for a long time because they know that any organization that he heads, it will not do anything in the struggle that the black man is confronted with in this country. Proof of which, look how violent they can get. They've been violent from coast to coast. Muslims in the Muslim movement have been involved in cold, calculated violence. And not at one time have they been involved in any violence against the Ku Klux Klan. They're capable, they're qualified, they're equipped. They know how to do it. But they'll never do it. Only to another brother. Now, I am well aware of what I'm setting in motion by what I'm saying up here tonight. I'm well aware. But I have never said or done anything in my life that I wasn't prepared to suffer the consequences for. Now, what does this have to do with France, England, the United States? You and I are living at a time when there's a revolution going on, a worldwide revolution. It goes beyond Mississippi. It goes beyond Alabama. It goes beyond Harlem. There's a worldwide revolution going on, and it's in two phases. Number one, what is it revolting against? The power structure. The American power structure? No. The French power structure? No. The English power structure? No. Then what power structure? An international Western power structure. An international power structure consisting of American interest, French interest, English interest, Belgian interest, European interest. These countries that formerly colonized the dark man formed into a giant international combine, a structure, a house that has ruled the world up until now. And in recent times, there has been a revolution taking place in Asia and in Africa, whacking away at the strength or at the foundation of the power structure. Now, the man was shook up when Africa was in revolt and when Asia was in revolt. All of this revolt was actually taking place on the outside of his house, on the outside of his base, or on the outside of his headquarters. But now he's faced with something new. Just as the French and the British and the Americans formed one huge home or house or power structure, Those brothers in Africa and Asia, although they are fighting against it, they also have some brothers on the inside of the house.
And as fast as the brothers in Africa and Asia get their independence, get freedom, get strength, begin to rise up, begin to change their image from negative to positive. This African image that has jumped from negative to positive affects the image that the black man in the Western Hemisphere has of himself. Whereas in the West Indies and in Latin America, countries, and in the United States, you or I used to be ashamed of ourselves, used to look down upon ourselves, used to have no tendency whatsoever or desire whatsoever to stick together. As the African nations become independent and mold a new image, a positive image, a militant image, an upright image, the image of a man, not a boy. How has this affected the black man in the Western Hemisphere? It has taken the black man in the Caribbean and given him some pride. It has taken the black man in the Latin America and given pride to the black man right here in the United States. So that when the black revolution begins to roll on the African continent, it affects the black man in the United States and affects the relationship between the black man and the white man in the United States. When the black man in the Caribbean sees the brother on the continent of Africa waking up and rising up, the black man in the Caribbean begins to throw his shoulders back, stick out his chest, and stand up. Now, when that black man goes to England, he's right inside the English power structure, ready to give it trouble. When the black man from the French West Indies goes to France, why the effect upon him of the African Revolution is the same as the effect upon us here in the United States by the African Revolution. This is what you have to understand. Now, up till now, there have been black people in France, divided. Black people in England, divided. Black people here in America, divided. What divided us? Our lack of pride, our lack of racial identity, our lack of racial pride, our lack of cultural roots. We had nothing in common, but as the African nation got its independence and changed its image, we became proud of it. And to the same degree that we became proud of it, we began to have something common to that same degree. So whereas formerly it was difficult to unite black people, today it is easier to unite black people. Where formerly black people didn't want to come together with black people, but only with white people, today you find black people want to come together with black people. All they need is something to start the ball rolling. So this is what you have to understand. And as the brothers on the African continent lead the way, it has an effect and an impact upon the brothers here. Upon the brothers here in the Western Hemisphere, so that when you find the Afro community in France uniting not only with itself, but for the first time beginning to unite and work in conjunction with the African community, this frightens the old de Gaulle to death, because he sees some new problems in front of him. And when the West Indian community, which is an Afro-American community in England, begins to unite and then unite also with the African community in England and reach out and get the Asian community, it's trouble for old John Bill. Trouble that he never foresaw before. And this is something that he has to face up to.
Likewise, here in America, with you and me, for the first time in our history, here you find we have a tendency to want to come together. For the first time, we have a tendency to want to work together. And up to now, no organization on the American continent has tried to unite you and me with our brothers and sisters back home. At no time, none of them. Marcus Garvey did it. They put him in jail. They framed him. The government framed him and put him in jail. Marcus Garvey tried. The only fear that exists is that you and I, once we get united, will also unite with our brothers and sisters. And since they knew that my sole aim in life as a Muslim, number one, I'm a Muslim for which I'm proud. And in one way, has this changed towards being a Muslim, meaning my religion is Islam? What's up? Okay, y'all sit down and be cool. Just sit down and be cool. As soon as a Muslim, when I left the Black Muslim movement, I realized that what we taught in there was not authentic Islam. My first journey was to Mecca to make myself an authentic Muslim and to bring them there up to date with the problems that our people who are Muslims have. As soon as we established our religious authenticity with the Muslim world, we set up the Organization of Afro-American Unity and took immediate steps to make certain that we would be in direct contact with our African brothers on the African continent. So the first step that has been taken, brothers and sisters, since Garvey died, to actually establish contact between the 22 million Black Americans with our brothers and sisters back home was done by two organizations. Done first by Muslim Mosque, which gave us direct ties with our brothers and sisters in Asia and Africa who are Muslims. You know, we've got to unite with them because there are 700 million Muslims, and we sure need to stop being the minority and become part of the majority. So as Muslims, we unite with our Muslim brothers in Asia and Africa. And as members of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, we set out on a program to unite our people on this continent with our people in the mother continent. And this frightened many interests in this country. Many people in this country who want to see us the minority and who don't want to see us taking to militant and uncompromising a stand are absolutely against a successful regrouping or organizing of any faction in this country who thought or whose thinking pattern is international rather than national, whose thought patterns, whose hopes and aspirations are worldly rather than just within the context of the United States border or borderline of the United States. So this has been the purpose of the OAAU and also the Muslim Mosque, to give us direct links, direct contact, direct communication, and cooperation with our brothers and sisters all over the earth. And once we are successful in uniting ourselves with our people all over the world, it puts us in a position where we are no longer the minority who can be abused and walked upon. We become part of the majority. And then if this man over here plays too rough, we have some brothers who can play as rough as he. So that's all I have to say about that. I wanted you to know that my house was bombed. It was bombed by the Black Muslim movement upon the orders of Elijah Muhammad. And when the bomb was thrown, one of the bombs was thrown at the rear window of my house where my 3 little baby girls sleep. And I have no compassion or mercy or forgiveness or anything of that sort for anyone who attacks children. If you attack me, that's one thing. I know what to do when you start attacking me. But when you attack sleeping babies, why, you are lower than a...
The only thing that I regret in all this is that 2 black groups have to fight and kill each other off. Elijah Muhammad could stop this whole thing tomorrow just by raising his hand. Really, he could. He could stop the whole thing by raising his hand, but he won't. He doesn't love black people. He doesn't even want to go forward. Proof of which, they're killing each other. They killed one in the Bronx. They shot another one in the Bronx. They tried to get 6 of us on Sunday morning. The pattern has developed across the country. The man has gone insane, absolutely out his mind. Besides, you can't be 70 years old and surround yourself by a handful of 16, 17, 18-year-old girls and keep your right mind. You can't do it. So from tonight on, there'll be a hot time in the old town, with regret, with great regret. There's no organization in this country that could do more for the struggling black man than the Black Muslim movement, if it wanted to. But it has gotten into the possession of a man who's become senile in his old age and perhaps doesn't realize it. And then he has surrounded himself by his children, who are now in power and want nothing but luxury and security and comfort and will do anything to safeguard their own interests. So I feel responsible for having played a major role in the development of a criminal organization. It was not a criminal organization at the outstart. It was an organization that had the power, the spiritual power, to reform the criminal. And this is what you have to understand. As long as that strong spiritual power was in the movement, it gave the moral strength to the believer, and that would enable him to rise above all his negative tendencies. I know because I went into the movement with more negative tendencies than anybody in the movement. And just faith in what I was taught made it possible for me to stop doing anything that I was doing and everything that I was doing. And I saw thousands of brothers and sisters come in who were in the same condition. And then, whatever they were doing, they would stop it overnight, just out of faith and faith alone. And by this spiritual force, giving one the faith that enabled one to exercise some moral discipline, it became an organization that was to be respected as well as feared. But as soon as the faith in the movement, the faith in the minds of the people of the movement was destroyed, now it has become a movement that's organized, but not on a spiritual basis. And because there is no spiritual ingredient within the organization, there's no moral discipline. For it now consists of brothers and sisters who were once well-meaning, but now who do not have the strength of to discipline themselves. So they permit themselves to be used as a machine for a man who, as I say, has become senile and is using them now to commit murder, acts of maiming and crippling of other people. I know there's a brother sitting here right now, tonight, who was beaten by them a couple of years ago. I'm not going to say. He knows. And if anybody should apologize to him, I should apologize. And I do apologize to him. Because he was beaten by the movement when I was in the movement. And I wasn't too far from him when he got beat. But this is what happens. And this is what we have to contend with. I, for one, disassociate myself with the movement completely. And I dedicate myself to organizing black people into a group that are interested in doing things constructive. Not just for one religious segment of the community, but for the entire black community. This is what the purpose of the Organization of Afro-American Unity is, to have an action program that's for the good of the entire black community. And we are for the betterment of the community by any means necessary. Since tonight we have had to get into this old nasty negative subject, we didn't want to bring up our program. We're going to have a rally here this coming Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 2 o'clock. Is it 2 o'clock, Brother Reuben? 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, at which time we will give you the program of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, what its aims are, our objectives are, what our program is, and whether or not you want to be identified with it, and what active part you can play in helping us to straighten Harlem out. Nobody's going to straighten out Harlem but us. Nobody cleans up your house for you. You have to clean it yourself. Harlem is our house, and we'll clean it up. But when we clean it up, we'll also control it. We'll control the politics, we'll control the economy, we'll control the school system, and see that our people get a break. So on that note, I'm going to bring this talk to a close. We're going to have a 5-minute recess, during which time we're going to take a collection so that we can pay for the expense of the hall, and then we'll take a 15-minute question period afterwards. So Brother James, is everything all set? Yes? We're going to have those lights or something else. We're going to have a collection period right now. And all we want to do, brothers and sisters, help us pay for the hall. And if each of you put $1 in those white pails, when they come by, we'll have enough to pay, have the hall paid for. I really want to apologize to you for taking you a good time tonight to talk about this nasty negative subject. But if you wake up in the middle of the night and your house is on fire all around you with your babies crying, you'll take time to get on a nasty negative subject too.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you all so much. Mashallah, um, that was wonderful to hear all of your voices, so many of your voices and delivering speeches. Everybody, whoever wants to come back in so we can have a discussion. I know Sister Baina, that you wanted to, I provided you with a speech about a week ago and from the lesson that you wanted to sort of talk to the guys, talk to the boys and about it. And I'm curious how you all, I guess, felt sharing this speech, which as Malcolm has called was kind of a nasty negative speech, right? um,
It's
with the boys. Yeah.
It's interesting because Israfil and I had a conversation this afternoon on the way to, we were running errands, and
Mhm.
come over here. So I was asking him about his reflection just on the section that he read,
Mhm.
in terms of wanting him to explain to me what resonated the most with him and why. And I
Mhm.
found it interesting, his comment. So I want to invite him. You want to get your paper? I have the speech right here.
My paper has marker.
Okay. He's gonna come.
Mhm.
So I was asking him to just share with me what resonated with him. You remember what you said?
Not really.
You're reading both Nico and Malcolm. Remember your comment?
Well.
Turn to the camera so the people can see.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Some of those. Thank you. Hi, Sheffield.
Okay. You can hear me, right?
I hear you. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Well. Let's see. Where do I start? Like, can you prompt me?
You said that his comments were striking to you because of how similar they were
Oh,
to
yeah.
your reading of Stephen Biko. Go ahead.
And there was something.
Talk to explain.
Oh, okay.
You say you're reading Stephen Biko, Israfil? Is that what
Yeah.
I'm hearing? Okay.
And I don't know. I noticed that a striking similarity between the way that the two operated in terms of the ideas that they carried when
Mhm.
speaking.
Those ideas being-
And
Go ahead. Go ahead.
and those ideas were that if you united a whole peoples, then it would be enough to uh, overturn, or so to speak, the current power or
Mhm.
political influence.
Mhm. Hmm. And
And
so,
then
can you? Who was Stephen? I'm sorry if you wanted to continue a little bit, but from what you understand, when did Stephen Biko live, or kind of who was he, and I'm curious, did he have any sort of relation to Malcolm X at that time? Well, what do you know about Stephen Biko so far as when he was around and who he was talking to?
Wait, could you repeat that?
I said I'm curious what you know about Stephen Biko, about when he was alive and who he was talking to.
Okay. Well, let's see. So I'm like a quarter or like a third through the book, so I
Mhm.
don't really know that much yet. But
Mhm.
from what I've read or from what I understand, he like Malcolm X was trying to raise Black or African American African consciousness,
Mhm.
and that's and he was murdered for it, or the ideas that he carried.
Mhm. Interesting. I'm sorry. Was there something else you wanted to say about how did you think is this sort of how things resonated? I'm sorry, the two how they resonated. You felt they had a lot of similarities. What was the most striking sort of thing to you, or what? And overall, I'm sure you read your part, and that kind of want to go around a little bit as people sort of read their parts, and you also listened to other folks, other people in the family, and Sister Lisa's family as well. Sister Lisa and Brother Salah's family. What resonated to you? What did you learn too?
So, like, what did I learn?
Yeah, what stuck out the most to you?
Well,
Oh, okay, okay. Well, let's see, like, oh God, I want to get like past, like, come back to me.
You want to?
Because I want to, like,
Oh,
He's
I
feeling
see.
fresh.
It's
Okay.
all right. I don't want to put you on the spot too much. Sorry.
You have something you want to say about how the section? Because you chose your section.
okay.
So you want
Okay.
to about that?
So I chose my section because I'm really interested in like the Ku Klux Klan. Not like because it's a bad thing, but like I want to like know more about them.
Mm.
And so I could like see that how like the Nation of Islam was like connected to like the Ku Klux Klan and everything,
Mm.
and like they were trying to buy land for them, and like they wanted to be separate from the rest of society, to like have their own like different society. So that's what I thought about my reading section.
Mm. Interesting. Wow. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, I wouldn't think like if this like Nation of Islam is like a group that wants African Americans to like be leaders and not be like racism and everything. Why would you work with like a group that is promoting racism, wanting to be unite America to be an all white country? So it kind of did surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that was the first. I mean, I want to say. I mean, this speech, he definitely said that in a way that I'm sure shocked a lot of people at that time as well. Yeah.
Ramaya, you want to come and give us your thoughts about? Oh, she's not. Okay.
And Sister Lisa, I know since you're a professor, you know, in particular. Oh, Sister Lisa's here. Sorry, I'll assist Sister Lisa speak. Did you want to say something, Sister Lisa?
You said Baina? Or you said Sister Letha.
But you meant Vienna.
Yeah, but Sister Baina. First, I was gonna ask her a question, but if you don't mind, you know, okay, cool. I just wanted to, you know, I know that Sister Baina is a professor. That you're a professor of history at North Carolina Central and HBCUs there in Durham, North Carolina. I'm curious for you, sort of reading the speech. What did you think? You know, were there any things in the speech that still surprised you, or that you know, I guess from a historian's perspective? Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you asked the question, right? Because when I talked to Letha about my concerns about this particular speech,
right.
And I'm so grateful to her for insisting that we deal with the difficult dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Concern was that the salacious context in the speech sometimes moves us away from fully understanding or benefiting from what Malcolm was trying to offer us, because we get entangled in that dialogue about, you know, the issue that he had with Elijah Muhammad and all of the things that happened to Black women in particular who were affected by him. So then we no longer talk about Malcolm and the lessons that we should gain from him and carry forward the legacy, because we're so mired by that part of the story. And what she so brilliantly brought out to me was that that's the reality, though, that you can't avoid having those conversations or only pick out the things that are comfortable for you to talk about, because then you deny yourself the full brevity of the historical moment too. So we have to deal with the difficult dialogues and talk about the ways that we can move forward and build off of the words that he left, because that's the beauty about Malcolm. Everybody has a way of claiming him that suits their particular interests. Also, Black nationalists claim Malcolm. There's Black feminist context built around Malcolm. Muslims in other parts of the world also claim him. American Muslims have, you know, we claim him, and there's room for all of us to do that and to some of the difficult parts of that that lived experience that he had. So I thank her for saying, no, Mina, this is the perfect speech for us to read. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. Can you speak a little bit more about that, Sister Lisa?
Yeah, let us speak.
Well, you know what it, and at the time I hadn't read the speech in its entirety. Mina was just sharing pieces of it. And for me, I'm the type of person that I like the whole person. So that means you take the good, the bad, the indifferent. I mean, because all of that makes up who we are. And so to recognize for Malcolm that, you know, as I read this and as we went through this exercise, what kept hitting me was he was a human being. He was a man. He was real. Because oftentimes when you think about figures in history that we lift up because of their brilliance, we lift them up and only see them in this brilliant context without seeing them for the whole person that they are, right? And so, you know, I'm thinking about him coming to deliver this speech, and in the context of this background of my house just got bombed, my children were there, my wife was there, you know, what type of pain and emotion that brought about for him, that to me makes him more human. And so, you know, who knows, maybe he would have never, you know, spilled the proverbial, the beans, you know, and told the secrets of the nation had these, you know, incidents not happened in the background. Maybe he would have, but I can understand the context in which this speech was written and delivered, just knowing that piece of history that was behind that. So I didn't want us to shy away from that. And even though I'm a product of the nation, you know, I'm a proud product of the Nation of Islam. My parents, you know, were introduced to Al-Islam through their experience through the nation. So I wouldn't be standing here today as a Muslim in America had my parents not had that experience. So I never, ever want to deny the full context of what brought that experience and what brings me and now my children to Al-Islam. So we have to accept it and be willing to have conversations and examine it, even if it makes us feel a little uncomfortable, because I didn't quite know all this was happening. Yeah.
Right. I think that's so important. I think, you know, I'm so glad to be collaborating with you all in particular, because knowing, you know, the collective history of, you know, at least, you know, many of you in the room, probably 3 or 4, you know, adults and our parents, you know, who came through the Nation of Islam. And that's something that, you know, still as a community, I feel is a difficult, you know, there's a pride, but then there's also that sort of difficult part, you know, to reckon with. But, you know, even myself, I was at the mosque the other day, and my mosque is one of those mosques that, you know, that was where Malcolm X, when he was in the nation, and, you know, went changed over, and there was an elder, just to add a little anecdote, there was an elder who was there, and he was upset that there was not a big picture of Elijah Muhammad on the wall. I just heard him going around just a little bit, where's the picture of Elijah Muhammad? This room is called the Elijah Muhammad Culture. I'm kind of spit that look out today. It's called the Elijah Muhammad Cultural Enlightenment Center. And every time I hear it, they just call it the Cultural Enlightenment Center, like they want to hide Elijah Muhammad. You know, like they want to hide. And he's like, where's that big picture? You know, and then you got some of the old folks, you know, and then, you know, then some of the younger folks in the community has changed, and it's, you know, that's part of the history, you know, and so I commend you all for having the bravery and still, you know, saying these things, even though, you know, when we think of a lot of Malcolm X, and I want you guys to, you know, maybe some of the brothers, some of the husbands can get into the conversation too, but, you know, within this is a context within Malcolm X actually really, it seems like he really wanted to talk about, you know, this thing about the worldwide revolution. He really wanted to talk about the plans of the OAAU.
Yes.
Right? That's what he really wanted to talk about.
Yes.
But then there was this other stuff, and you know, so I just wanted us to sort of think about that, of like where he wanted the community to head, and then there's so many parallels to us as Muslims right now, to like what should we kind of be doing with all of this history.
Right. You know, what I find interesting about the plan that Malcolm was trying to lay out was that it had a dual purpose. On the one hand, we had the platform of the OAAU being unveiled. Also, simultaneously, is the work of the Muslimized Inc. And what was so brilliant about that, and I was talking to my husband about it, was that he recognized that religion could not be the central focus of a Pan-African organization like the OAAU, because once you center religion, and in this context, the religion of Al-Islam, then you leave an enormous segment of the Black population out of that dialogue.
Right.
And so he allowed the work of Muslimaz Inc. to do its building in terms of connecting them with other Islamic nations, and organizing in a manner that would position them to be, as he said, a part of the majority of Muslims globally. And at the same time articulating this idea of Pan-Africanism within the context of the Organization of African American Unity, which was brilliant, I felt. And that's one of the things that when we think about the idea of nation building for as Muslims, and Lisa, don't leave, because we've had this conversation before about when we're trying to do community work, and the community that we're really targeting are not all believers in terms of believing in Al-Islam, but we nonetheless have an interest in serving our communities. And sometimes because of the religious leaning, we don't always serve the community till it's in the best manner because of the religious I lost my train of thought, but because of the importance of trying to maintain our religious ties, that sometimes we lose sight of what's important for the larger community. And the thing that I was thinking about mostly was when we were trying to do the education forum, and we were talking about, I can't remember, there were people coming in looking for services, and we both sensed that some people were really uncomfortable with the presence of some members of the community who, you know, may have had mental health conditions or other kinds of needs that the community wasn't used to having in the masjid, right? And so that became a hindrance in terms of being able to reach a larger group, because if people don't feel welcome, then they're gonna go someplace else. And I remember, if you remember, I don't know if you remember, but you were talking about the how we have to recognize that if we're going to serve the community, all the community is not going to look like us. They're not all going to believe like we believe. But if the goal is, if the commitment is to Black people, then we have to stretch a little bit, you know, even if it's uncomfortable. And that's what I think he was trying to do with the Organization of African American Unity, to get Black folks to stretch a little bit. I don't know. You want to build on it? Huh? Oh, Ramaya?
Ramaya back there as well.
Yeah,
I know she
Ramaya.
wanted to add something to that. I see Ramaya back there. I'd love to hear what she has to say, because I know Ramaya's a budding activist.
Yes, not budding.
Come on up, sister. And she's an activist. Yeah, she is an activist sister. And I wonder how much how Malcolm X's words resonated for you, and you being, actually, speaking those words.
Well, what resonated with me the most had to be the fact that he was saying that they never attacked, that the Black Muslim movement never attacked the Ku Klux Klan, and I didn't know that. And like all the history that I was taught, it was always that the Black Muslim movement and the Civil Rights movement were always very heavily intertwined. And so I just kind of assumed that they attacked the KKK like the Black Panther movement did as well. And so when just finding that out was very shocking. But Malcolm X is a very prominent person for me when I'm thinking of my activism work, because he he was very vocal on about African American issues and children and the rights of children and things like that. And so I look up to him, and you have to take with anybody who's a role model. You have to understand that they're still a human being, and that everything they do, of course, is not going to be the best or the best, but you have to take it in the context of the situation and things like that.
So I'm curious, there was this part, I know that you mentioned that part where he spoke about the KKK resonated with you, and I'm wondering if it's more so, if a lot of that is really, that it's kind of shocking. I know you mentioned that, but I'm curious, there was this important part of the speech where Malcolm X talks about how the sort of liberation movement and the freedom struggles of the Africans on the African continent that inspired and galvanized the Black Muslim movement and then galvanized all these other movements like the Caribbean. And he basically, there's a part in the speech, I don't recall right now who read it, but there's a part earlier in the speech where he okay, I'll read it back to you. Malcolm X, he says, when the Black man in the Caribbean sees the brother on the continent of Africa waking up and rising up, the Black man in the Caribbean begins to throw back his shoulders and stick out his chest and stands up. Now when that Black man goes to England and he's right inside the English power structure ready to give it trouble. And then, he goes on to say, when the Black man from the French West Indies goes to France, why the effect upon him of the African Revolution is the same, etc. And so, I'm curious when that's actually, if you wanted to look at it, it's on page 121. He goes on and he's talking about basically looking at all these different struggles of basically activism work, starting in Africa and that having this sort of ripple effect. I'm curious how, if any of you in sort of your activist work or thoughts have ever felt something like that happen in your lifetime. If you ever saw another struggle, and other people sort of rise up or struggle or, and if you think that was true, if you see that as being a way how people sort of operate, within the within the context of Black people in particular.
Well, I see truth in those statements and his words, because if you think about it, if you're oppressed people or you're downtrodden and maybe you haven't had the wherewithal to fight for yourself, but then you can see other people who are oppressed who are rising up, then that gives you the courage, right? That gives you, and that's what Malcolm's talking about. And, to fast forward to now, there has been, in recent months, a lot of connecting between the struggle of, people of color or Black people here in America connected to the struggle of Palestinian brothers and sisters. And it's been a concerted effort to kind of show the similarities within that struggle, because I think it, again, recognizing that we are more powerful connected in our struggle than separately fighting, as individual groups for our struggle. I've attended at least one event in the Triangle area in the last few months that was a concerted effort, with panelists from the Palestinian perspective and panelists from the Black experience perspective to kind of show, this connectivity. And I know there's been other events, and I know, I read recently that some of the activists from Ferguson, Missouri, actually traveled over to Palestine to connect, with individuals over in Palestine, again, to show the similarities. Because, if there's power in our oppression coming together to fight against the oppressors, because, I personally think the oppressors are the same. They may be in different parts of the world, but, that ideology is the same, whether they look the same or not. It's the ideology. And so, us coming together as a collective to recognize each other's struggles and then find out ways where we can, lift each other up and help will only make us be successful in overcoming whatever that oppressive situation is.
And I also think that too often we isolate situations as if they're not all interconnected, and that as if we're not all interconnected as human beings and as people, and that just because your skin color is different than mine or your religion is different than mine doesn't mean that we do not have similar struggles. We're not gonna know the exact struggle because we're not in your shoes, but we're gonna know something similar. Like I'm black, I'm a female, and I'm Muslim, so that's like a triple whammy there. And so I understand the struggle of three different groups. So I mean, when you can find those interconnections, and you can find people that you really that really understand what you have been going through and what other people like you have been going through, it's powerful. You can unite together, and that makes your movement stronger. Having three individual movements is weaker than having one conjoined movement of voices from all over that can really tell you exactly what the problem is, who the problem is, and how it is specifically for their situation. And that's what I think he was saying. It's like when the black man in the Caribbean saw his brother on the continent of Africa waking up and opening his eyes and understanding and not no longer being blind to the issues, it empowered him into being able to now go to the white man, into the English power structure, and be like, hey, this is wrong. And now I already knew it, but now I can really say something because I know other people are out here with the same struggle and with the same understanding that I have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yes,
so
Samaya? Yes, ma'am.
so going back to what Maya said, she said that all these problems have like a connection to it. So one day in the car I was sitting with my dad, and like in downtown Raleigh they're pushing out a lot of African Americans and like farther into like the outskirts of Raleigh. So I was thinking, I was like, it's like Palestine, but it's not as rough, but it's like they still have similarities. Like they're pushing out the Palestinians farther out, Palestinians out further out the country, and in America or in Raleigh they're pushing out African Americans farther out. So
Good connection.
That's an excellent connection. And I think, it's beautiful that you could feel that sort of, build that kind of compassion for other people just through, and bring it to a larger context. This speech, Malcolm X, is named as a worldwide, revolution going on, and indeed it was, and it seems like it probably is one going on right now as well, so long as we connect the dots. I'm curious how the brothers, the husband, fathers, they're around.
Yeah, they're here. We're bringing them to the forefront.
Okay, alhamdulillah, thank you.
We're gonna step out.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you so much for delivering parts of Malcolm X's speech. Curious what resonated to you the most about the speech.
For me, it was something I never heard. I didn't know that Malcolm X had spoke of Elijah Muhammad in that way. So that was shocking for me. But just like my wife said, you can't push that in the background. We have to deal with it. That Malcolm X did have some friction between him and Elijah Muhammad, and I think that the reason behind that is because when he went over to Mecca, because his speech was after he came back from Hajj, so he had a chance to really see the world, see the different cultures, and also get a chance to really have a different perspective on things. And I think that him going over there helped him and also gave him the courage to say what he said and did what he said. I think he's just telling the truth, and he's always been that way. He's even when he was with Elijah Muhammad, he would speak truth to falsehood. And I think that doesn't take away from Elijah Muhammad. it shouldn't take away from him. It just shows you how Malcolm X had evolved into the human being that that people see him now as. And so, and as a person who is like Baina, she studies history, and as a person who studies history, you have to get all the facts. You can't put certain things in the background. You have to bring everything to the front. And I think this is something that that is good that it's out in the front, and then we can talk about it. Yeah.
For me, there were two things that sort of stand out. One I'm kind of thinking of as I'm speaking about it. First was the abiding message of strength through cooperation. You see a similar sort of pattern between the oppressor and oppressed in many places in the world, and ultimately it's about trying to realize that when you deal with like-minded people, not necessarily those who look like you, not necessarily those of the same creed, not necessarily those of the same professed belief, but those who are like-minded and want to see oppression end, you benefit, and everybody benefits from cooperating with each other. That's one thing. The other thing that stands out in my mind is looking at this dissonance between the professed goal of the organization and what it was actually doing, according to Malcolm's perspective. I mean, I think here part of it is considering the idea that you can have an organization that professes to be beneficial, but whenever you begin to examine its actions, you really are thinking about, or you really are looking at something that is in a way undermining the professed goal. And so it's one of those things that should give us all pause whenever we start looking at quote unquote, messianic leadership or whatever it may be. Are they actually working in service of the professed goals and aims that they claim to have? Or are they doing things that are, ultimately detrimental or slow down progress, and that they are really doing things that are beneficial to them, but are not actually about advancing other folks or other communities. So just those are two of the things that I take away from this speech.
Wow. I have another question, but before I ask the specific question, it has to do with Imam Razi Muhammad in relation to Malcolm X. But I do want to get sort of the let's see, who else did we have speak? We had Mikhail. I just wanted to I did want to get everyone's thoughts a little bit before asking a question. And I think we had was it Jabril as well?
Where's Jabril? Yeah, I gotta get ready.
Do y'all have school? Do they have school tomorrow?
Yes.
Before we finish, there's a couple of minutes, inshallah. I was like, I didn't know tomorrow's President Day. I don't know if they have school, but okay, yes.
Yeah, our boys do.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't know that either. I chose this date because I thought they didn't have school, but they do.
MashaAllah. But Mikhail, I wanted to thank you so much for presenting part of Malcolm X's speech. You did an excellent job, and I wanted to just hear your thoughts about about this speech, and even about Malcolm X in general. What resonated with you? Like what stood out the most to you? And that would be the thing.
I guess when he was, well, it's like a really big idea in the speech, but talking about how we need to be united globally and more specifically with Muslims in the Afro-American. Okay, yeah, with just people in the Afro-American community.
Okay.
That stood out to me.
Did you have any thoughts about that?
Well, not really. That was like just one thing that stood out to me. It was really clear, so yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Brother Jabril, did you have any ideas, anything that stood out the most to you, or that was the most important to you about the speech?
Was there anything important to you about the speech?
Honestly, well, with all due respect, I
Mhm.
guess for parts of it that I find interesting and very serious.
Mhm.
So I guess I say like like I think the Black Muslim movement thing, that's what stood me out the most, because considering the fact that what happened, what's happening in the past, that wasn't that sort of wasn't that didn't sort of whatever happened in the past, it's leads up to what I know now.
Mhm.
You
Like
see a connection
I think in
between the
the
past and
past
the
and the
present.
present, that might
Mhm.
see a connection in the past,
Mhm.
present, that might lead up to the towards the far now future,
Mhm.
like what we what we should be worrying about.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
look, you had you started this speech that the real Elijah Muhammad did a few years ago, many years ago, and
Mhm.
so we picked up. I say we would pick off where he would left off.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying it
Oh,
for
okay.
Elijah
In
Muhammad. I meant
her, in her,
in
in
her,
her
in her,
having
and
us
you
remember.
have.
Look, wait. In her calling us to remember him is a way of us picking up where he left off. Is that what
Yes,
you're
I'm
saying?
saying, but not that for everyone, for all of those that we know and love and remember in well, Black African American heroes, we
Mhm.
like stand like stand up. We don't we don't like I mean anyway, you know how it is.
Mhm.
Anyone, any other African American heroes that we know, and so they gave us people, we all of us, a chance
Mhm.
to to fight for what's right for our nation.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's all I gotta say for you.
Alhamdulillah, that was beautiful. I feel definitely. I feel the same way that you feel. You know, I feel the same way that you feel. I feel there's for me, there's a lot of strength in being able to
And a lot
read and to speak and to know what they said
and a lot of struggles.
and the struggles. Yeah, definitely. Do you all see just to sort of and we'll wrap up, within these next few minutes. Um, Thank you so much, Jabril. Since I know that many of you in the room have studied, um, have studied the teachings of Imam Warsi Muhammad in particular, and I think that there is a lot of, for myself, even this part of what Malcolm X is, the part where he is talking about what what Elijah Muhammad did, or his accusations of Elijah Muhammad, is not very dissimilar actually to what Imam Warsi Muhammad said in some of his earliest speeches in the early 70s, when he turned the Muslim community to Orthodox Islam. We know there was a time in Imam Warsi Muhammad's life where he was pretty vocal about, look, I just want y'all to know everything my dad said was, that there was a role for him. There's a role for Elijah Muhammad, right? But that we have to, as some people in my community would say, code breaking, and know what, be able to separate the truth from I guess from the codes that mask the truth. And so I'm also wondering if you felt like there's any sort of similarities between um, some of what Imam Warzi Muhammad was trying to do in his sort of early years as he took over, the Nation of Islam, as became the leadership, and then also if you see any sort of like legacies there between maybe what Malcolm X was trying to do and like what's happening in the Black Muslim community right now, and kind of what our role is.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Salah wants to talk first.
Well, I think they both. I think Imam Wardi Muhammad echoed what Malcolm X was doing or what he said. So, like you said, it's a lot of similarities. And even during that time, Imam Elijah Muhammad was his father. You know this, but he had excommunicated him from the community. So he had the same struggles that Malcolm X had with his father. So their approach was very similar. I think there's a lot of parallels that you can put between the two. It's a lot of parallels. And I think one of the things Imam Wardi Muhammad was trying to do, he was trying to help the Nation of Islam transition into the American public and become citizens, become patriotic. And I think that if it's just my opinion, I think if Malcolm X would have been still alive, they would have been working together.
Oh, yeah.
Working together and had a similar approach. So there's a lot of parallels you can bring between the two, and a lot of things that they did.
So, the only thing that I would say about Imam Muhammad approach that Salah mentioned,
if you could come a little center, Sister Baina, if you could come a little bit center.
In terms of Imam Muhammad's approach to, back up now?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, sorry.
To build a sense of community and maintain the cohesion that the nation established for many African Americans who joined under the leadership of Elijah Muhammad, but also, as Salah mentioned, building this idea of patriotism. I think that was something different than Malcolm was articulating. Wasn't necessarily arguing for Black people to embody an American identity as much as an African Black identity, one that stretches globally to the diaspora, and that's Pan-African. Yes. But on the same hand, Imam Muhammad also was articulating Pan-African identity when the naming process changed in terms of calling Black Muslims Bilalian. Like that placed it in a more global context, and naming the community the world community of Al-Islam, like positioning us globally. I think that was in a similar way related to Malcolm's ideas, but the notion of patriotism, I don't think was something that Malcolm was articulating and would have accepted as an identification for Black people. I don't know about that, and we're just speculating because he didn't live. So.
Right.
That's why I said, because I'm not trying to have a debate here, but what I'm trying to say is that I think Imam Wardi Muhammad was in the same mindset as Malcolm X during his time, but as he constantly evolved to the American society, he understood that you can't be separate from the United States and get any type of productivity. You have to go into the mainstream. You have to go into the mainstream. You had to be a politician like Keith Ellis. I mean, these are Keith Ellis is a prime example. Yeah. Keith Ellis, the congressman, is a prime example. He listened to Imam Muhammad's speech. He would come to Juma. He would listen to him speak. And so one of the things Imam Muhammad told his community is to get into the mainstream, try to get involved in politics. So I think that and she's right, it was different, but it was different times too. But if
I think I misunderstood
yeah.
that. I thought you were talking more about black people identifying as American,
Okay.
and that's something I think that was different
Okay.
than what Malcolm was articulating.
Yeah.
We're citizens of America, and we should have rights within this nation to govern our own communities politically, to have an economic system that worked for us, an education system that worked for us. So I think that Malcolm was, both Malcolm and Warith Muhammad were articulating similar ideas in that vein. And I misunderstood when he said this sense of patriotism as being, something that the American identification should override your identification as a black person and as a Muslim. And I think was very forthright and clear about where our allegiances should be.
I don't know why. Okay, alhamdulillah. Yeah, I mean, I think it seems it's in an interesting way because Malcolm X did name the thing of Elijah Muhammad's sons in a way, but we know that Warzi Muhammad being one of his sons that he struggled as well with this thing of the truth and with this thing of going into Orthodox Islam and what that would mean for his life and even for his acceptance and identity within his own family. I didn't know if Sister Lisa, if anybody else wanted to say anything else about the regarding the speech or any sort of thoughts that that have come out through the discussion before we.
Final thoughts? You have any final thoughts? No. Yes, Letha does. She's coming.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum. I just want to thank you so much for thinking of this, for bringing this about. It's very powerful. I thank Baina for having the fortitude to think about, bringing our families into this space to share into this experience, because, who knows what the benefits will be for our children, in the future, to be exposed to a speech by Malcolm, to be able to, read the speech, to internalize the words, it's powerful. And so I appreciate you for organizing this effort, and I appreciate Baina for thinking about our family and bringing us into this space, because I have thoroughly enjoyed myself tonight. So thank you, and may Allah continue to bless you to bring forth these great ideas, and please tap me on my shoulder if you come up with something else, all right?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
I just echo Letha. I told you privately that I believe you are brilliant, but I'm going to say it for the world to hear. You're brilliant, and I affirm your brilliance. I thank you for inviting us to participate in this effort.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you all so much. I know this is the second time I've collaborated with you, Sister Baina and your family. I was like, oh yes, I'm so glad that you all were coming aboard this project. I was like, maybe we'll be long time collaborators. Who knows? But alhamdulillah, it's such a wonderful experience to to collaborate with you all as my sisters and brothers, and and also as people who I think are very conscious and thoughtful and articulate about these ideas. It's kind of like the perfect combination to me. And your children too, not just the parents, but the children, which I think is absolutely wonderful. I think it's just testimony to how important it is for us as communities, as adults, as people to share knowledge, to share knowledge with, not just, with our families first, our families being those most important people to share that knowledge with. So, I would like to, thank you all, Sister Baina, Brother Dwayne, Sister Lisa, Brother Salah, and children, from Mahaya to Naya. We had Brother, I didn't say Sadiq, but I think Sadiq is really little, so. We got Jabril, Israfil, Mikhail, and Idris as well. Thank you all. And, inshallah, that we have just two more. We have just two more of the XPs happening. And we mentioned a little bit in this speech, Malcolm X mentioned the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. And alhamdulillah, we're so fortunate tomorrow, one of our collaborators is Imam Talib Abdul Rashid, who is the Imam of the MIB, Muslim Islamic Brotherhood, which is the legacy. This is basically the outgrowth of Muslim Incorporated. And so we are living in this history. It's still alive. You know, that people are carrying on this history as you're carrying on with your family, you know, as well, and through institutions. You know, and again, we'll have Suad, and as I know, Sister Veda, you saw Suad in the first, I think maybe the first her sister Donna Austin. So I hope you all will, you know, join us tomorrow. You know, whether it's in, you know, in the hangout or through watching or through commenting. You know, and then the last one will be on Wednesday. I mean, it's amazing. We are, you know, sort of living and trying to track these footsteps, living these footsteps, and we feel the pace. And then in this speech, Malcolm X, he mentioned what his plans were for the 21st, and we know that was the day that he was assassinated.
Yes.
You know?
And I can feel momentum too in the speeches. You know, I was with another sister yesterday who wasn't able to join us today about how he seemed to have been driven. You know, like I felt that Allah was really moving him, because when you think about the amount of miles he covered in such a short period of time, trying to bring the message to people globally as well as deal with his own community, and that love and commitment it must have taken for him to do that. I mean, his house was bombed, and he still showed up to talk to the people. I mean, what an incredible human being. And nothing but Allah could have been guiding him to be able to do that, you know? Alhamdulillah, we had a chance to claim him in a way that even in the difficult, messy part of the dialogue, that he was speaking to us and our children. And we can take lessons from that and manifest them in our own lives, you know? Alhamdulillah for him.
Alhamdulillah. And thank you for, you know, for doing this as a family. The family is we are the most important, you know, they're our most important audience, the most important people to share with. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so inshallah, I think, you know, I can't thank you all enough for, you know, for participating, for being collaborators again with me in this project, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Every time, inshallah. Well, I guess we'll get those babies to bed.
Yes, okay.
I didn't know they had school tomorrow, but alhamdulillah.
They thank you too.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam.